Hey everybody, this is Savraj Oria here with the Distro Boss Podcast. I'm here with Nick Russell from Dualo. He's an expert in knowledge management and helping teams make better and faster decisions. He built a software around it. He's a co-founder of that company, but he built a software as a SaaS. It's really interesting software. It's great. We want to hear about his transition from the world of work into the world of being an entrepreneur in business. We know that being an entrepreneur and being successful in business are two different things. There's one thing to have an entrepreneurial mindset and have the gusto to go and do something yourself, but then you've also got to have a plan, right? You've got to have a plan that actually works so that you can stay being an entrepreneur and being in business. So we want to hear about that transition, and hopefully, by the end of this podcast, we'll probably have a good idea of the steps it takes to get into a successful business, like the recipe, as it were. So Nick, man, I'm so happy you're here. Could you give us a quick introduction about yourself, perhaps, and just tell us how you got from A to Z, like how you transitioned in?
Yeah, absolutely. It's no pleasure, and thanks for having us here. So so a little bit about me. So I'm one of the co-founders of Dualo, as you've just introduced. And prior to Dualo, I was leading digital product teams at companies like ASOS, Gusto, the Food Box Company, Thomas Cook, and the Telegraph. So I've been working in digital product for pretty much most of my career, and a little bit, about sort of Dualo and why I decided to go into doing something like this full time. I've always been fascinated by business. My dad grew his own business to a global leading brand. So I've grown up with that, watching shows like Dragon's Den as a kid, and still very much follow that show. Love that sort of that content, the way that people think, and understanding how people sort of pitch what they're doing and what they're passionate about and the problems they're solving for. And obviously with that show, sometimes more for entertainment purposes than anything else. But I've always had a side project or a side hustle through school, college, university. And when I was first sort of working in London, like that side hustle evolved into, I guess, my first sort of launch. I launched a website called followinnovation.com, and basically it was a non-commercial thing. It was purely a way of me being able to get through the gates at places like Microsoft Ventures and the Google Campus and the other startup accelerators around London, and be able to get into those places on a regular basis as a
just a quick one. So startup accelerators, they're like these kind of like almost like co-working office spaces, right? Like a hub where entrepreneurs sort of come together and can work in the same environment. Is that what we're talking about here? Like when you say accelerators?
Yeah, exactly that. So it's typically for first-time founders that are going through the process of building a business from the off, without much experience, looking to band together with other founders, looking to work with mentors and coaches and people who have basically been through the process before. And by coexisting together, you're surrounding yourself, you're rubbing shoulders with others that are like-minded, looking to achieve similar goals in different industries, different technologies. And so they're a great environment for startup founders and experienced founders who have sold 1, 2, 3+ businesses and looking to share their learnings. So while I had a full-time job, I was working as a consultant for one of the big 4 companies. And I effectively thought, well, with my free time, like, what can I do to get closer to these people, right? I've got this lifelong aspiration to become a founder myself. I'm still trying to work out like what field I want to focus within, but how can I sort of proactively get myself out there and get talking to these people and sort of absorb their mentality, their mindset, their stories. And so I set up this site called followinnovation.com, and I ended up just through Twitter at the time, building a bit of a following and landing an interview or 2 with a couple of founders in London, and sat down similar to this. I would speak with them for an hour. I would ask them about their journey, what their vision is for the company, what they're looking to do next. And and I would form that into a written article and put it on this website. And after I got a few of those published, I was able then to go to the big startup accelerators and say, hey, look, I've done 3, 4, 5 of these articles on these founders across London. And that sort of opened doors. They said, well, why don't you come in and interview 10 of our guys and girls? Why don't you come in and interview 20? And so that grew into this side hustle. At one point, I had like 10 like student journalists kind of working for Follow Innovation, all for free, publishing to this site and building this following. And it never became something commercial for me. It was never intended to be that. But it allowed me to, over the course of the few years of doing that, really understand what was needed to get started on doing something bigger and doing something more commercially driven, and starting to build that recipe that you're talking about. So
you were like exploring. You were like kind of like a toe in the water. Like let's see. It's almost like it would be very quick. Like you could wrap a business around that model if you wanted to, just follow innovation if you wanted to continue down that road, because I feel like a lot of people do that today. Like that's in and of itself, that's a business model in today's world. I mean, you did this how many years ago?
So I started that, I mean, it must have been coming up to 10 years ago. I think it was around sort of 2015 that I sort of really started, putting the pedal to the metal and really going for that and making it a consistent thing. And once a week, trying to put some time into it and figure out an interview for the weekend and all that kind of stuff. So it was a great journey. It was, as you say, it could have been made into something bigger. At the time, I think I lacked the commercial awareness that's needed to understand how to turn something like that into something you can monetize. But ultimately, I wasn't too bothered about it. So that never sort of materialized. And so I ran with that for a few years. But the ultimate intention was I never wanted to continue as the person that was just writing stories about other people. I wanted the story to be written about myself. I wanted to write my own story. And so
after that, like the inspiration moment, was that your light bulb? Like, okay, I've seen it, I've heard enough. It's time for me to go, and it's time for me to go and just build something. Is that where?
I've always known, like from before I can even remember, having memory. I've always known that I would end up doing my own thing, and I think a lot of that is probably inspired by my dad and sort of growing up with that around me and sort of seeing that as a success and something to aspire to. So I've always known that that's what I wanted to do. And anyone that worked with me at any previous company will have had their ear chewed off at some point about that over a drink or over lunch. I'm enjoying what I'm doing now, but ultimately I want to be doing my own thing, and that's where I'm headed. And I made that very clear and very vocal to everyone that I worked with. And that helped me in a way because firstly, the companies that I worked for were understanding that people do have their own aspirations, and you're walking a fine line, right? You're trying to side hustle without crossing over your commitments to the company you're working for. So it's got to be in your own time and things like that. But if people that you're working with are aware that that's your long-term aspiration, it opens up conversations and introductions and just situations that wouldn't be open for you if you didn't put yourself out there in that way. So the Follow Innovation was a big step towards realizing that vision, because it was the first sort of proper side hustle that I had that really got me involved in the industry, really got me in front of founders, face to face and spending time with other people. So yeah, I wouldn't say it was the aha moment for Dualo, but it was a big part of freeing myself from the corporate
confidence building. Yeah, just having those kind of interactions and having that influence, I guess, because you would say you had reporters working, even if they were not paid, but you were still producing content, and you were in a position of like influence. You had a following, you said on Twitter. That's got to give you the the confidence. It's going to help towards getting, building the confidence to step into the world of business. I mean, if you've got you said you work for companies, like you've got to make that decision to say, okay, I'm going to quit this job. I'm going to stop getting a salary. Rent's due at the end of the month. I got 30 days. So I've got to start building a business now. Either I make enough money in 30 days to be able to pay my bills, or I have enough money invested so that I have like a runway, if you will, like I have a length of time available to me to make something successful. It's like you have to factor all those things in. And if you don't have any confidence at all in your ability, that just becomes a dream. That just becomes a fantasy. Like you have to have some degree of executable experience where you can say, okay, I've done something before. I know how to like go on a limb. So this is going to be it.
Definitely. Yeah. It's a confidence building game. Yeah. The entrepreneurial journey, or just, professional journey, just personal life as well, right? It's all about building confidence. And so, most entrepreneurs will get into the entrepreneurial journey either by, as you say, taking that jump or making that leap, or they're pushed into it, right? A lot through COVID, a lot of people lost their jobs, and still particularly in the tech industry right now, there's a lot of layoffs that have been happening across the industry for the past year or so, given the tech crisis, the recession, just the economic environment in general. And so a lot of people end up being pushed into a position where they can then start applying this confidence for themselves and go after, a dream that perhaps they thought they might never get the chance to go after. And that's somewhat what happened to me. I mean, I worked for this big four consulting company. I moved to a smaller consulting company after that, much more digital product focused. And that's where I picked up all this experience with the likes of ASOS and Gusto and the others. And I'd actually planned to take a year out, like after working at this company for 5 years or something, you get like the sabbatical where you could take some time out, reassess where you are with your life. And so I decided to sort of plan to travel the world with my now wife to be, and we left just before Christmas in 2019. Good timing for a world trip. So we had, I think it was 8 months planned. Within a month, COVID-19 became a thing. And as we traveled around the world, it became more and more of a thing. And we ended up getting locked down in India for the first lockdown. And, of all places, we actually, the day before the lockdown happened, in the north of India, across the states in the north of India, we effectively moved from Varanasi to Rishikesh. We made the decision to get a flight from Varanasi, which is a beautifully hectic, crazy, buzzing city, to Rishikesh, which is, where all the mountains are, and it's where you have all these yogi retreats and where the Beatles wrote the White Album. It's this beautiful place. And so we sort of were, I guess, in a way, very lucky that we made the decision to move and then get locked down there. And we had 6 weeks there, because being locked down in Varanasi would not have been so good for the mindset, I think.
Yeah. And now you're like a super tranquil, kind of like get in touch with your own self, learning kind of place. So okay, so this is like, you're meditating. Are you doing all that kind of stuff up there? And
yeah, so I learned how to meditate with the guys out there. I met some amazing guys, Mohit and Sarav out there, who ran this retreat basically. And we were meant to just go there for a week, and obviously we ended up there for 6 weeks, locked down. So we sort of became a little family, and they let us stay for the time. They helped us get out of the country in the end. But while we were there, we ended up doing like a elongated yoga meditation sort of course. And so multiple times a day we were doing yoga, we were doing meditation. I have to admit, being 6'4", yoga can be a little bit painful. But it's
I can only imagine. I find yoga painful. I mean, I personally, I don't like it. My wife makes me do it all the time, or she tries to get me to start it. I mean, I'll do one pose and I'll just like, okay, that's enough, it's over with. But and I'm just stiff because I just do like normal traditional like resistance work in the gym. I don't do any stretching per se. I'm just like, I just lift heavy and get out of there.
Yeah.
But I know it's meant to be good for you. I just don't do enough of it. But Yeah, 6'4". I mean, some of those moves.
So I'll send you a photo sometime. I did end up, my heat ended up getting me standing on my head 4 weeks into it. So I was, we made some progress there. But the bit that I became fascinated in, and I've always been fascinated in philosophy, bit of a tongue twister there, was the meditation side of it. And it's something I still practice to this day. But so we had this amazing moment where, Rishikesh had probably transported back in time to what it was like thousands of years ago, right? Like pre tuk-tuks buzzing about, and sort of like you just had this amazing ambience where you could hear like the crickets and the birds and everything. So it just became this incredible like one-off experience. And at the time of going through this process of just learning about how to clear my mind, I was thinking a lot about what next. And my best mate from childhood, who I've known since I was 10 years old, Dan, who's now one of my co-founders, he was looking to start a business. And he was like, look, I think this is a great time for me to start my own thing. I've got some ideas. What's going on with you? And do you want to get involved? Basically, I'd love to do this with you. And so that planted the seed.
How Dualo was born, right? So this is where. So you've been finding your inner self. You've been getting enlightened, and your buddy's like, well, he's back in London, is he?
He's at the time he was back in London. Yeah. Actually, he might have been in Ireland. Between the two, he moves about a lot between the two. His wife's Irish, but I think he was in London at the time. Yeah.
So he's there. He's come up with some. It's like, well, so what does he come up with? The idea for the business, or is he looking at like the space and says, look, we got to do something here?
We'd spoken a few months before, just before we traveled to India. We were in Costa Rica and we were getting a flight onto the next place in Central America. And Dan initially called me then, and he was sort of saying, look, I'm still at my current place, but I think I'm going to make this jump. And I spoke to him and I said, look, you've probably got loads of ideas about what you want to be doing. And he'd been working as a product designer before, and I'd been working as a product manager. So I was like, look, if I had anything that I could give you to think about right now before we chat again about this, just try and focus on the problem space. Like, don't think about what ideas you've already got in mind. Like, think about some big problems that you've experienced at work that you want to solve for.
So you just mentioned two titles. I just want to like clarify. It's like, so a product manager and a product developer. So a manager, as I understand it, is like, and we're talking about software here, right?
Yeah, digital product software.
Yeah, product manager, from as I understand, and this is really for everyone else that's listening, you would essentially like, so you're not doing the coding essentially yourself, but you're kind of reviewing it. You're maybe recruiting the people to build certain elements, certain verticals of the software. Is that right?
Yeah, it's an evolving role. So that's one big part of being a product manager. And so what you'll find is the more holistic role is not just integrating with developers and helping to guide the product roadmap and what's actually being built, but also interacting with customers and the business to understand what needs to be built. So it's like figuring out what to build and then also working with developers on how to build it. So you're ultimately, coming up with solutions that benefit both the customer and the business in a mutually beneficial way, right? So that's the role of a product manager, effectively.
And a developer, as it sounds like
So developers are focused primarily on taking what the customer is looking to do with the product, the jobs that they're looking to achieve by using the product, and with the work of the product manager and product designers figuring out the solutions that should be built to enable a customer to achieve X, Y, or Z. So they're very much deep into the code, the infrastructure, hosting this stuff, launching new features. That's really the technical side of the product team, is the product developer. And Dan was a product designer, so he kind of was the third part of the trio. He's a very creative individual, very visually talented, and product designers and people like Dan are able to understand a problem that someone's looking at and translate that into a solution. Design the journeys that someone would go through on a mobile app to book a flight, or how they would go about downloading and setting up a new playlist on Spotify, or whatever that experience is. They're designing the visual experience and also the experience that surrounds that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I preach a lot, like to anyone that cares to listen, and of course, even if they don't care to listen, I'm usually just chewing their ear off about business stuff anyway, because I just love talking about it. And it's like, one of the things is like, when it comes to building a business, no matter what it is, and I felt like I heard it in what you just said there, in terms of when you built your software, you've kind of picked your market, you picked your niche, and then, as I said, niche, that's the American niche. So you picked your market, your niche, and you've built an audience. I'm assuming, because you say you're trying to fix problems. Are these problems that you've like come up with yourselves, or are you surveying people? Are you like asking around, or is it just your industry experience that this is a problem?
Yeah, I think for us anyway, it came from our industry experience, right? So Dan was exploring these problems. When I got back and I realized that Dualo was what I was going to be doing full time, and joining him, we spent a lot of time in that problem discovery space together. And so we were effectively, using online whiteboards to just brain dump all of the problems that we had experienced over our careers in the space, and starting to form some sort of idea around which of those problems were the biggest or the most interesting to explore. And we knew that we formed part of the target market, but we also knew that that's a very dangerous place to be, because if you end up building for yourself without validating or really testing where the actual problems are with others in the market, you're going to end up in a pretty sticky place, and probably end up bowing out earlier than you'd like. So
this is essentially what I ask. I say, like, you've got to obviously know what market you want to get into, and then you've got to build your audience. Or what you want to do is you want to build or buy into an audience and ask them what it is that they want, and then sell it to them. And if we're taking that concept, it's like, throughout the years of experience, your exposure with businesses. So you work for consultancies, you mentioned. So those consultancies work with other companies, and you're building. We're going to have to explain what Dualo does in a minute, just to like, it's all kind of glues together, because I feel like, because you're working with companies in ways to help them make better decisions, more efficient, whatever it is that this software enables, and you're seeing all the things that are lacking. And so even if you haven't got a list per se, over a certain period of time, you've essentially asked those people those questions anyway. And that's kind of how this has happened. And then, of course, now the question is what is it that they actually want? So you're just guessing this now, or you're basing that on the previous like Q&A, I guess, you've had over the years?
Yeah. So the first part is to really figure out what is the big problem, or the 1 to 3 problems surrounding a particular topic that we want to solve for, and that there's a big enough market to go after. And when I say big enough, that really is dependent on you as a founder, right? Like, what does success mean to you? Are you looking to build $1 billion company? Are you looking to build a lifestyle business, something that you can, that will pay the bills but won't necessarily turn you gray before you're 30? Or are you looking for just a side hustle? Like, there's varying levels of what success means to you. And from there, you can work out, is the market that we've chosen, is that big enough to fuel that vision? And that's something that we've learned along the way, and probably, with an honest reflection, is something that we just didn't have the experience to really, understand how to do from the off. But if I was to do it again from the off as a first-time founder, I would encourage anyone to, alongside figuring out the problems that you're going to solve for the product side of things, also start thinking, how big is this market? If I'm talking to, let's say, product managers, how many product managers are there globally? How many are there in the US, UK, Europe? And how much do we think we could charge for this thing as an initial idea? And how much money could we make from this? That's what I mean by sizing the market.
Yeah, it's like, I think that's actually a really good point, because lots of people they'll come up with. I find that when I speak to people, and we talk about, and I speak to a lot of people who have like business ideas, who are entrepreneurial generally, and so, but some of the ideas, and look, most people's, provided they're sensible, most people's ideas are actually pretty good when they come up with it, and it's like they could probably all work. It's just like, are you the person to do it? And B, like, okay, yeah, like there should totally be. I mean, one conversation was, we should, like, why is, like, when you're on the subway, whether it's in the US or whether it's in the UK, for instance, on the tube, like, why don't we have like free, fully accessible Wi-Fi through the tunnels? It's not that difficult to put a router everywhere. Like, why isn't that? Well, yeah, it's a good business, of course, and if you can, the memberships would go skyrocket. But the thing is are you the person to do it? Can you scale big enough to get that kind of contract? I mean, that's you're going to have to be a big enough force to do it. So yeah, you might have an idea, but like, where do you see yourself fitting into that idea? Like, do you want this to be like, do you just want to get rich? Because there's way easier ways to get rich. Like, because that's a very big organization you're building there, with big contracts, with big companies. And so that's a suit and tie business. That's there's businesses where you can wear t-shirts like I'm doing right now, but we
both got the black t-shirt memo today.
That's it, man. I emailed you about that. We're like, yeah, this is, like, do you get to do the black t-shirt day, or do you have to wear the suit and tie, and do you have to go to boardrooms, and you have to fly around and meet people and schmooze and do the whole thing? Like, what type of company do you want to create? Because it's, an idea is an idea, but like, you got to think it through. And unfortunately, you have to think it through, which means you got to guess. So you got to guess to a degree. So how was that with you and Dualo? Like, so you've come up with the idea. I don't know if you've come up with the name yet, but you've like, all right, this is the space. These are the problems.
Yeah.
I think this is here's a bunch of solutions. Here's one that we think we could work with, or three, or whatever, however many you want to encase into one software as a service. Like, tell us a little bit about like how that kind of came to fruition, and I guess what does Dualo do? Tell us that. I think that needs to happen at this point. We need to know.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So yeah, we went through the process of transitioning from the problem space into the solution space, and through a number of iterations, prototypes to begin with, breaking things down, not trying to think too big. You're thinking big, but you're also thinking about today as well, and how to step towards it and not overwhelm yourself. Today we've arrived at Dualo, what it is today, and what we are today, 3 years into the journey, is we are a B2B solutions provider that helps companies get from customer research to business impact faster. So we have an AI-powered insights platform that's used by teams to organize and distribute research findings org-wide. And we also offer coaching and consulting services to teams via Dualo Academy. So we have these different, it's like a pick and mix, if you like, of solutions that we flex based on the customers we're speaking to and the problems that they're experiencing. And that's been a 3-year journey to get to this solutions provider.
And so this is basically assimilating vast amounts of data and just, is this making sensible? It's like saying, here's outcomes. Here's what could happen with this data. Is that kind of? I mean, I'm trying to speak about it in the most layman of terms here. So
yeah,
because I know there are some people that are watching this. I know that they're not looking at software as a service. They're not looking at software. They're thinking, something completely different. They're thinking product. They're thinking service as a human time service. So this is interesting, and so I just want to break it down a little bit so people can understand. So it's using AI and other mechanisms internally to take a hell of a lot of information and present it in simple ways so that you can make better decisions quicker. Is that right?
Exactly, that's the crux of it. So it probably helps to explain it in the context of our initial niche, because we've been operating in that space for the longest, and I feel like articulating Dualo in layman's terms is probably the easiest given that use case. So let's take everyone has a mobile phone, and everyone has apps, their favorite apps on their homepage. And if you just take one of those apps, your favorite app, behind the experience of that app, you using that app, there will be a team of product managers, product designers, product developers who we've already spoken about, and also researchers as well. Sometimes product designers do a bit of research as well, but there'll be people effectively at those companies who will be speaking with, engaging with customers and users like yourself to understand what works well, what doesn't work so well in the application, and how can they use that to improve the experience. And so these people care about the experience from your perspective as a customer, as a user. And obviously the businesses they work for care about improving the experience because it's going to help with having you around as a customer longer, making more revenue, upselling you other applications, other products and services. And so what happens is these teams end up with a ton of research that they've done on you and other people. And this research ends up sitting in slides, slide decks, PowerPoints, docs. It ends up in all these different places, spreadsheets. And the bigger you grow and the more research you do, the more knowledge, the more insights you have about your customers, but they become scattered across all these different tools and all these different projects and all these different people. And it becomes this fragmented mess of data. And what teams struggle with, the problems that we solve for, is it takes an hour a day for researchers to try and piece the puzzle together to answer questions around customers. And teams end up spending 20% of their time duplicating previous work because they can't find the stuff that they've done previously. So Dualo is a single point of contact. And what these teams do is they drag and drop all of their documents into Dualo. And Dualo uses artificial intelligence to process the language, the knowledge within those documents and connects the dots between the different documents. So at scale, you can start to uncover and highlight new patterns, new opportunities.
So are you saying, like, if it's got all this information, I'm working in a company, I'm a senior salesperson, I've got a client I've got to close. I'm like, hang on, let me just pull some stats, you know, because that's like a use case that I can think of. I'm like, let me get some stats really quick. I need to build a slide deck. I could go to Dualo and ask, I guess, and when you say AI, I'm thinking the way OpenAI works. I could go and ask, hey, I need this, and this. Give me some numbers, and it just spits them out. So I don't have to go and find. I'd have to draw reports from a CRM system or anything. It could just spit that information out, and then I could go ahead and execute against my sale. I can go and do my presentation, but I haven't had to go through the rigmarole of pulling reports and then getting those reports in spreadsheets and then going to a graph or just that kind of stuff. Are you saying that this is a one-stop? I could just go in there, tap in, and get what I need?
Exactly that. And the generative AI piece is on our AI roadmap. So right now we've been focused around using the system to help or suggest summaries for documents, suggest tags for documents, suggest links between the content in documents. So basically that's encouraging people to overcome the cold start problem of building a repository like this. It makes it much easier for teams to go, oh, cool, I can drop 10 docs, 5 docs, even just a couple of docs into this thing. And it's already building a structured graph connection of this information.
And when you pull information, does it do the same? It says, well, there's all these suggested things that you might want along with it.
Exactly that. And then the next step to layer on, which we're working on next in the roadmap, is to put the generative AI piece in. So effectively, you can chat to your knowledge, you can chat to your organizational knowledge. It's like a brain. You can say, hey, send me everything we've got to do with our customers in Germany that are sized 100 to, I'm using the sales use case that you've talked about, just 100 to 500 headcount, that have an objective around retention. And we spoke with them in the last 6 months or whatever. It will pull that for you, and it will return you that information. So you don't have to pull reports and go to the drive.
I can see this use case in pharmaceuticals too, with like gene sequencing and all sorts of different things. They could pull all sorts of information in that. That's amazing. And I think as a SaaS too, and for all those that might be listening to this and thinking, oh my God, this is getting really complicated and technical. But one of the things I love about software is that it doesn't have to be always that complex. I mean, you can build software at different levels. You're going down that road. That's great. But I think and if we take it back a bit, let's take it back from the use case or the specific about your software. Like when you chose to make it a software and not like just a consultancy, because you could have done that as a consulting company, you know, you could have been an early version of SAP and just took in, brought in Oracle or something, and then just gone to other consultancies that have clients and saying, hey, we've built this like database using existing frameworks, and it can do this, so we'll plug that into your company and do what SAP did essentially. I love that story when I explain like software, because I'm like, they didn't actually make anything initially. They just packaged Oracle and then sold it, and then everything into like massive companies through consultancies like, McKinsey and the various others, and those consultancies effectively sold Oracle for them. So Oracle weren't mad at SAP for doing it. SAP had a sales team that was selling for them because those were the consultancies that had the clients, and then their software, which is branded Oracle, was then embedded into those massive companies like Ford and whatever. And so they couldn't get rid of it because they're parcel of the fiber of those businesses. So, and they made their own stuff. So it's like, how, you could have done that, which is service-based white labeling essentially, but you went ahead and built your own software. Like you went ahead and I think I want to hear your rationale for the software itself, because I think people need to know, because I always promote the fact that the beautiful thing behind software as a service is once you've built it from an entrepreneurial standpoint, you're just selling volume. You're trying to get, I mean, there's obviously work that you have to do to maintain and build and upgrade, but you are really just shifting your focus to sales. You're closing. You get the more members you get, if it's $100 a month or $200 or 5,000 per user per month, whatever it is, you can start to stack up way faster than you can most other companies.
Definitely. Yeah. That's the exciting thing about SaaS, is the stacking up. Yeah. And so, there's different levels of software as a service. There's a lot of micro SaaS now being done, where you've got one person teams building something in their spare time, getting it to market via these micro SaaS platforms that, do the go-to-market for you. And they're bringing in, 1, 5, 10K MRR, monthly recurring revenue, for themselves as a side hustle. So you can get that micro SaaS really quite big, actually, as a side hustle. That's a goodbye full-time job type thing, right? That's no longer a side hustle. Then you've got, big, so we've definitely gone down go big or go home route, right? The platform is big. We've had to spend some time building the core product, and with a small team that takes time. And so in that sense, we couldn't sit around and not start selling the thing until the core product was there. A lot of people talk about MVP, and there's lots of differing views around that as in general these days. But with B2B software, enterprise software, plus selling to researchers and product designers and product people who get product, who know what good experience is, it's very, very difficult to where am I going with this, to effectively my point I'm trying to make is that we had to get people using it alongside building it, and we had to try and sell it alongside people using it as quickly as possible from a business perspective.
Yeah, because you can't, because it's one of those things, right? You're building a journey, essentially. It's like, this is a tool. I need it to be seen that it works. Like, people need to see it work. People need to, and also use it. I think, what, in your company, do you use it yourself for your own business and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we do. We use it ourselves for a number of different use cases, and that always helps, because by dog fooding the product, you're really experiencing it as well.
One of the things you just said, you actually said it a little while ago, and I've been listening. I was like, okay, I've got to ask you a question, because a lot of people, and I keep saying a lot of people, when I say a lot of people, usually I'm just saying me. It's me that has a question, and I know that I represent a whole bunch of people with, maybe similar questions. Oh, at least I'm hoping so, right? So the thing is, when I think of AI, I was like, initially, initially I was like, okay, AI is amazing. And I was like, holy crap, it's going to kill a lot of jobs. And I think
Mm.
everyone had that kind of like epiphany, that instant epiphany. Oh yeah, wait a second, hang on, it can do what? So you're fired and you're fired and you're fired. It's like, but then I realized like very shortly after that, and it wasn't so obvious, but it kind of crept up on me that actually it's going to do so much more because AI allows the smaller person to get into business and create something super sophisticated. I mean, it sounds like from what you've been able to do with your business, you've been able to, I mean, you understand how to piece it together because you're experts of your industry and you know how to apply the AI. But it's like AI can help glue a hell of a lot of stuff together that maybe a much larger organization with a lot more resources would have been able to do prior to that. Like now you can do it with AI because it can make sense and assimilate information way faster than you hiring 20 Ivy League super experienced candidates in. Like this thing, it could trump 100 of those because it can just work so fast. Would you
Definitely.
say it
Yeah,
kind of closes the gap now? So between your ability to get into a complex space, so this, I guess what I'm saying is, it doesn't actually, it shouldn't scare you away from or make you worried about jobs. It should, if anything, have you optimistic about the type of business that you can create because it can take on a lot of weight.
100%. Like, here's an idea for you. Like, here's a recipe, if you like,
Yeah, we
for,
want to hear recipes.
right. So here's a recipe. If I was gonna start another business, and it's likely that I will after Dualo as well, right? The first thing I'd do is I would if I hadn't yet, for whatever reason, been living under a rock or whatever, hadn't heard about ChatGPT, I would, I'd go and learn about that, and I'd go and get myself an account on OpenAI, and I would effectively go through the process that we've been through at Dualo, but using ChatGPT to streamline the whole thing. So I would, initially I think you have to do the first bit yourself in terms of choose your area of focus. Like, are you going to do a business to help organizations? Is it going to be a customer facing business? Is it a service? Is it an app? Is it a health thing? Whatever that might be.
You got to pick your market and figure out your niche. Yeah.
Pick your market, figure out your niche, and then go to your friend ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And I would sit there and I would, probably within a few hours, you could get where we got to within a few months. Like, you just sit there and you'd say, what are the 3 top problems that this particular persona is experiencing? And you'd take that and you'd take the output from that, and you would go up solution idea for these 3 problems that you've given me, and ChatGPT will serve you back some form of ideas, solutions.
Because it will say to you, if you've ever asked that question, it will say to you, oh, I've only got a brain or memory up until 2021 or something. I'm like, okay, that's good enough for me. Let me know.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It's a lot of information, and it cuts a lot of corners. You feel like you're cheating with it sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to understand that it's I think the best way to think about generative AI right now is that it helps you overcome that writer's block. Like, it gets you started. It means that you don't need to sit there with a blank sheet of paper. You can sort of put something that you're thinking about into ChatGPT without even understanding too much about how to prompt it and what prompt engineering is. And you can get something back that's, almost like bouncing an idea with a mate down the pub. It's that kind of level. But it just, as you say, it draws on a lot of data and information from many, many years. And so, you can even take it to the point now where you could ask it to, once you've figured out which of those solution ideas you like the best, to code it up for you in to write you the initial application. Like, it's at that level now where you could pretty much use it to do that, use it to write the basis for a pitch deck, and go and raise a small round, within a week. It's crazy.
Yeah, and really that week is you just getting comfortable with the pitch. Because it could probably,
and I don't mean raising the money within the week. I mean, you're going
out there to get it.
Yeah, let's just be clear on that.
Let's manage some expectations here. But like, so that's a really good segue into like automation, because I did want to speak to you about that, because we've spoken about you transitioning into the business. We've spoken about you building a SaaS or software with this expert level of care, because you guys have been in the system, in the business, in that industry for a long time. But that can be quite time intensive. As a business person that's been in business since 2010, so that's a long time working for yourself. And it's like, sometimes it gets old where everything's kind of on you to do everything. Like if the bucks, even if it's you and a partner, it's still a lot for two people to bear. Like you do genuinely want to turn off and just not care after a certain time in the day. After a while, in the beginning, that's not the case. It's kind of like when someone first starts the gym and like, yeah, I can work out, I can be on top of my diet, I'll work out every day. I'm like, cool, but it's going to get old. It's going to get old because you're going to want to do other stuff, and it's going to get in the way of your schedule. And then, so that happens with business too. There is a time when, like that grace period, dies down. It's like, okay, even it's not that the business is bad. It could be doing great, but you're still like, well, I want to go on vacation, or I want to watch movies. I want to binge watch that entire series on Netflix. You're like, like whatever the case is, it doesn't matter. It will get in the way of whatever you want to do, because you're going to start to grow as a person, because this is like an obstacle that you've faced, that you've now overcome, and then you're going to want to do more. So automation comes in, and automation doesn't just mean AI. I don't mean that's the reason why we segue, but automation in terms of genuinely increasing your staff members, increasing the human capital, the meatware behind the software, right? The people that you can offload some work to, responsibilities to. Like, how is that? Where are you with that? I know you said you're only 3 years in, but where are you with that as in your trajectory?
Yeah, I think we're still very much in the earlier stages of automation. You really have to do everything manually first to really understand how it works and what to automate and how, right? And so I remember the earlier days where Dan and I were looking to automate some of the outreach that we were doing to prospects in our market, and Mike, our technical co-founder, almost sort of trying to get us to slow down on that front and saying, guys, like, there's no point setting up an automated cadence and firing it out to a load of people if firstly we don't have more confidence around who we're targeting and also what we're saying to them. And obviously at the time we were running so fast, we were kind of like, yeah, but that's going to help. It's going to provide us with more time. But so you've got to, I guess what I'm trying to say is you have got to do a certain amount of everything manually first.
Yeah.
And that comes down to everything. That comes down to reaching out to customers. It comes down to your sales playbook and understanding the calls you have and what you say on each call and how to go through that process. It comes down to updating the copy on your website and how you're positioning the value proposition and content, writing blogs and articles and those initial bigger pieces of content that then later on you can chisel down and get faster at and automate and use tools to help with that. But when it first starts, you really everything needs to come from you, because as you say, you're the expert, you have the point of view, and also you're learning a ton of stuff as well at the same time. So we have so far, we've scheduled daily social posts from our company page, chiseling down our bigger form content, our blog posts, our videos, ebooks, things like that we wrote earlier on in the journey. We've also started to set up automated outreach sequences for LinkedIn, but doing this properly now, like, there's this story.
Direct selling? Are you going straight to the client?
We are doing a blend of direct selling outbound and then content marketing inbound effectively. So we have two streams, but yeah, a fair.
Try that SAP, man. You should go find some consultancies that already have a book of clients, and if you can have your opportunity embedded, their sales pitch, so they're doing the selling for you. That could be a way to do it.
Who's to say we're not doing that already?
Okay, all right. That's how we got started. How do you think we survived this last 3 years?
So we're doing a little bit of that. And we've, as a distribution growth model, we've identified that that's a huge one for us, right? We're able to crack the agency consulting use case. that's when things really start to stack up, to take it back to our growth conversation earlier. And so, but the certain things have to be in place in the product and the value prop in order to unlock that market. And so this is what I mean about when I was talking about having to sell while developing the product, because the product is a big product. It's a simple product, but it's a big product in terms of what it does, in terms of what it delivers. It means that you are constantly fine-tuning the market that you're going after, the positioning, the value prop as the product evolves. And you're always trying to sort of walk 1 or 2 steps ahead of where the product is, and understanding who can I sell to, so that by the time I've sold the product, it meets what we've been talking about as part of the conversation. So it's a really interesting journey.
What it promises, yeah.
It's really interesting journey. I think, as I said, like, that's the bit that I've learned the most about, I think, through doing this journey. I had the passion for building a digital product. So did Dan, so did Mike. But, all of us came into this with less experience around building a business. And I think that's as soon as you start to understand buying and selling and business and product and how those things wrap around each other, that's really where things start to stick and the confidence really starts to climb, and you sort of you talk and you behave and you put yourself forward as a very different person to what you would have at the very beginning of the journey. You step it up, and that's quite an incredible thing to experience from a founder perspective, but also from a personal growth perspective as well.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And so, and if you marry that now with you mentioned like you have ambitions to start other companies later. So you do have it from that. What that tells me, along with your personal development, is like, this is part of your journey. This isn't the thing that is your end or be all. Like, are you building, like, and I guess this is I have to be careful about this question, and I suppose you have to be careful as to how you answer it, because it is your current ongoing concern. But when you built Dualo, did you go into that business model thinking, we're going to build it up, we're going to provide the best of the best, we're going to engage clients, we're going to build a long-term solution, so it's going to be a long-term play, but also it's a long-term book of clients, and we're going to look to exit with a technology that is scalable, that can be sold, and a client book along with it, with the brand that ties with it? Did you consider that as part of your exit, or were you thinking, we're just going to grow it and grow it and grow it, and eventually we're going to put someone in charge, get a new captain of this ship, and then we're going to sit in the back and own a smaller percentage and gather investors in or something? Like, how did you did you even think that far ahead? Is it just I
think the short answer is no, right? I think a lot of founders will sit there, and it's very easy to draw a very straight line between where you started and where you are today, and when you have a conversation like this, make out that it's all smooth sailing, and first we did this, then we did that, and it all just clicked and worked and happy days. The reality of the situation is that it is a chaotic turmoil roller coaster, on even the day-to-day basis, and any founder understands and appreciates that. Like, hard work becomes the understanding of what hard work is, it becomes a whole new definition, right? That you take on and you appreciate. And so
hard work is just non-stop work. It's like
it's non-stop. It's non-stop. You're right. And it's, even if you're not physically sat at your machine or engaging with customers and clients, it's, your brain is still going on it, and you need to find ways and people to help distract you from that in a positive way. But where I'm going with this is that, those types of decisions or aspirations, particularly as a first-time founder, and although I've done follow innovation, things like that before, I'd label myself as this is the first real one, if you like. You just don't, when you start, you just don't have even the experience or understanding, or even know that what an exit is, and what that can consist of, and how you want to play it. At the time, you just know that you're super passionate, you want to make a difference, you want to make a dent in the universe, you've got a brilliant idea that you've tested, and you're just going to go with it. And I remember, like, one of my old managers sat down with me before I left my last place, and he sort of said, why don't you give it a go? This is before I went on my sabbatical. Why don't you give it a go? And I was sort of sat with him saying, well, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that, and surely I've got to do a bit more time here or somewhere else and figure that out. And he was like, you've just got to get started. Don't worry about that stuff. You'll either figure it out as you go, or you'll end up hiring people that are much smarter in that particular field than you are, and they'll help you get to where you want to go as a company with your vision and mission. And I just remember thinking, great, that's great. It gave me the confidence to sort of go, actually, yeah, I know enough right now to take the leap or to make this happen when I got back to the UK. And ultimately, that's just how it is. You figure out those things. So yes, of course, like when we started it, how much money we'd make came into the equation. That's going to be a big part of it for anyone. You're going to be working hard.
Businesses, that's the lifeblood of any business. Everything else is wrapping. Like, it needs money to survive. If it's not revenue generating, it needs investment money. It needs something. You need the money. So it has to be. Some people say, I have no the interest in money. Or so, well, then don't get into business then. Like, you have to have an interest in money. But it doesn't need to be the thing that defines you, your company, but you absolutely positively need it, because it's going to keep you going. Because how will you pay? Because you got to pay taxes, man.
You got to pay for the food, the rent, having a good time, all this stuff. And so it's a big part of it for sure. But to bring it back to your question, like, Dualo's not going to be the thing that I do forever. And at some point, we will sell the company, and we will get it to a point like you described, where you've got a scalable product, you've got some great logos. There might even be a few products under the umbrella by that point. Who knows? We'll see where we go to. We've got some ideas, and we're still very much experimenting towards those. And the vision has and always will stay in place. It's strong, it's firm, it's agreed, it's shared, it's motivating for everyone, and that's really important. But in terms of ownership or control, let's say, the ideal state would be to maintain the majority ownership and control until the end of it. That's really, we're not in it just for the money. We're in it to develop those skills and to become the leaders of this thing from start to finish, and to be recognized as the guys that built this thing from the ground up and really made a difference. Like, that comes into it as well. And those conversations about ownership and control, that all comes down to at the end of the day, how successful you can make it off your own revenues, and do you need to bring other investors in, and how much are you willing to give up? But I think the intention has always been, let's try and make it as far as we fucking can, together, and without necessarily bringing on that external capital and diluting our ownership. Let's really make the most of this thing together and see what we're capable of, right? That's the passion, that's the motivation and drive.
Yeah, I think that's where the entrepreneur and the plan kind of meet, right? That's where you've got a plan and it worked. So you've gone 3 years, and you did it through COVID, right? So you built that during the time at which, like, it's kind of hard to do anything. It was hard to just go and shop for food, right? At one point, at least. So it's like you've gone through, I guess, that first round where entrepreneur mindset has met the plan has kind of worked. So now it's like, okay, you meet again, and now it's just like, you've got that fuel, that energy, that drive behind you that's kind of taking it forward. And you're like, okay, how far can this go? Yeah, sure, we'll think of an exit, but how far can I take this? Like, what kind of, whether the company survives longer than me is irrelevant. It's still part of my legacy. If I can take this from 0 to 100 million or 0 to a billion, that's always going to be part of my story. And I'll take that to the grave, So I feel like there's definitely a part of that plays on people, and they kind of realize it a little bit later. But okay, so I think we're at the point where I feel like, for everybody's listening, let's quickly just do, like, I guess, the quick recipe. I think, if you're in a business, you're working for a company. Oh, by the way, you did mention something. I'll say this. You said your manager kind of like promoted you, like, well, kind of, I guess, encouraged you to do this, and maybe even gave you permission at some point. I'm not saying that that's the person who gave you permission and you want to put all the he doesn't get all the kudos, but like,
For sure.
yeah. But like definitely, someone that was because I had a recent conversation with a guy who actually left his company to then create a business in the same space, and he hadn't spoken to his boss's management about it. So because there are a lot of people in businesses right now, so some of them aren't as technical. Some of them, like, you could be working in sales and thinking, I want to go build my own sales company selling the same thing. It could be, I'm going, I'm working in a marketing agency, I want to go build my own marketing agency. I could do this job better than the company I work for could do it. And those are viable business models. But the thing is, you immediately become the company he works for, the direct competitor, because the only people are the people they know. so who are you selling to? Like the companies that you were speaking to with us, like there is that as well. Like when you said you worked in the consultancy space as a product manager with consultancies, so I'm assuming there is some overlap. Did you ever have to worry about that when it came to starting out? Did you step on toes? Like were like people in your past like unhappy with your move into this
Right,
because it was a competitive element? Or
I think everyone was very supportive, actually, and I think that comes back to what I was talking about up front about being very open and honest throughout my journey everywhere I worked, that that was something I wanted to do. I'm not saying like it's difficult when you first join a company. You've gone through the interview process, you've told them how you're going to be driven here for the rest of your life and all of that stuff. But once you've worked somewhere for a while and you've built some relationships with people, you can start sharing this stuff, right, with people over drinks, over lunch or whatever, and you will find people will be receptive to it or they won't, and you'll learn to appreciate the people that that give you the time to talk a little bit more about that. And so the last place I worked before Dualo was very, very supportive of people, doing a side hustle, having long-term aspirations, because their mentality, their point of view on it was that people will leave and do their own thing, and if you've had a good relationship with your employees, the chances are that when that thing works out or doesn't later on, they might come back or they might bring business your way. It's that sort of, you're building an ecosystem, and you should be supporting the long-term aspirations of your employees. And so I really respected that, and therefore I had a lot of support in when I let them know that I was going to do my own thing. In terms of building the business for Dualo, I was very respectful, actually, of not initially reaching out to clients and customers that I'd worked for and with. Obviously, wherever you work, you'll have sort of non-compete. You'll have certain clauses in your employment where you might by law actually not be able to reach out to your previous black book of clients or whatever for a certain amount of time. Let's say typically it's 6 months, a year, something like that.
yeah.
So I don't think I had anything like that.
Yeah.
Non-compete. I didn't necessarily have anything like that, but I just wanted to play it respectfully. I didn't want anything to backlash me for going off and doing my own thing. So the way we did it was we ended up utilizing LinkedIn, and we still utilize LinkedIn to this day. It's one of our primary channels. Was initially
development.
Sorry.
Or for generating business, for driving in new clients.
Generating business.
Is that how you guys started? Like, was that like the first thing, or did you go through like the consultancies, like your distribution channels? Like, did you go through like, all right, we've got this software, it's kind of working, we can start getting some trials out there. And I want to wrap up the conversation. That this conversation with this is like, you've given us a recipe so far, and it's like you've gotten to the point you built something. How do you do that? How do you get those first deals through? How do you get that first £1, that first $1 through that subscription? That like, how do you? Because that's when you draw first blood. That's when you know that you're in this. Something.
Yeah, that's good. I still got a screen grab of that saved as a favorite. The first ever paycheck that comes in. That's a big moment.
Yeah.
So personal network via LinkedIn was the first stepping stone, and building the product with a number of reference customers, if you like, and then a few of those ending up buying the product, subscribing to it when it was at a point where they saw enough value.
Oh wow! So you reference customers in the sense that you know who these people are. Have you spoken to them about what you're building?
Yeah, so these would have been people that we engaged with from day dot.
So you've literally asked them what they want. They've told you, and you're like building it for them. Like
it's
like a survey. Like, hey, we listened to what you just told us. Here you go. Like,
yes, exactly.
On a silver platter. It's just like
yeah. It's a concierge service, if you like, for those initial customers. Like, we, as part of the problem exploration, we were having those conversations with them. As part of the solutions prototyping, we were putting prototypes in front of them. We were tweaking it based on their feedback. And then when the build happened, we got usability feedback from those. And if you do that with enough customers at the beginning, you had at the beginning, myself and Dan's networks, we had maybe 50 companies that we were sort of like speaking with throughout that first 6 months to a year. And then the chances are, 10% of those will end up then, when the product's at a certain point, buying it off you. Then you've de-risked the whole initial 0 to 1, right?
I would say that's the recipe right there. I would almost say that's it. Like, because I was going to ask you my final question to you, and if it's going to be different, feel free to give me a different answer. But like, my final question was going to be, if there was a recipe, like, what would you, the question that is like, what kind of piece of advice would you give to the person sitting at the desk who wants to, like, okay, I'm ready to quit. I'm ready to quit the day job. I'm going to do this now. I'm going to build this business. If I was to take everything from what you've just said, that would be the recipe. It's okay. Go find your clients, the ideal target market you're trying to sell to, and then ask them what they want, and then build it for them, and say, "Here, look, listen, here it is." Like, that to me sounds like the recipe. But what if you have a different version of that? Go ahead, tell me what it is. Otherwise,
yeah, I think that's the recipe, and you can apply that to B2B like we've done, but you can also apply it to B2C as well. But there's the pre-recipe, right? There's this spark, the inspiration, there's the what makes you really go and open that cookbook and get going. And so if I was to say to, like, your listeners, anyone who's thinking to for the first time, it's like, the first thing you need to do is take some time to figure out what you're passionate about, the market, the niche that we talked about already today. Then you need to figure out how big you want to go from the start. Is this an all or nothing, do or die? Is this going to be a lifestyle business? Is this going to be a side hustle? What does success mean to you? And these are things that you can start asking yourself, just like, why you're pouring a cup of tea. Like, these are like just things that you can mull over without even having to think about making the leap. It's just self-reflection, understanding what makes you tick, what could you focus on for a significant amount of time, and what does success mean to you, so you know what you're going after, you've got your goals in place. And then it's really about documenting your vision. I write everything down. Writing is thinking. And just start collecting together your thoughts about what is this thing that you could build, what problems you're going to solve for what market. Just start getting it down and going and finding others who believe in you and your vision, and get started with talking with people. Get started on that recipe that we've just started talking about. Ultimately, if you're focused on your vision and you're working hard, the rest will follow. And that's that. Right.
That's brilliant, man. I think our conversation today has helped a lot of people. Whether it's one person or 100, doesn't matter. I think whoever listens to this, they're going to glean something from it, because we did cover some depth here.
I think we covered the ground.
It was fun. It was really fun, man. All right, I'll leave it. I think we'll leave it there. Look, we've got more coming. Like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.